All right, I want to thank all of you for coming to class this morning. We're going to talk about paperwork and the importance of what needs to be done and when it needs to be turned in and how it's to be turned in. There's over the last couple months, I guess, it's been hit and miss, would be fair to say. It ongoing, okay. So what we're going to talk about, and we're going to try to make this class as brief as possible. Please speak up or chat if you have any questions. So what we're going to cover today is what documents are needed for listings, what documents are needed for transactions, and we're going to talk about how to turn the paperwork in, like I like to say, get it uploaded or get it submitted to the brokerage, and the importance of when you get those documents turned in. So for those of you that are in class online, I will email this out as soon as class is over with. I have a cheat sheet of a list of all the documents that are needed for both listings as well as for contracts. And this is simply to help you guys have a cheat sheet, make sure you have everything needed. See here, I've got someone saying that they have screen says waiting for others to join on Teams when I try the link. We're not on Teams. It should be a Zoom link. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go through the list of items that you're going to need for your listings. The important thing that you guys need to remember is when you turn your paperwork in, you need to keep your listings separate from your transactions, from your contracts. When you submit them all at once, it really messes up the system for Tracy and Devin. So let's cover what is needed in the listing documents. Obviously, you need your listing agreement. That's kind of important. You need to have the signed MLS. Now, it's not a requirement. The state doesn't require it, but our wonderful broker, Mr. Fox, would like to require it, but it's not absolutely necessary. The reason you have, and this is the discussion that I always have with other agents in regards to signing an MLS or even just having them initial it and date it, is that it does mention the MLS in our purchase contracts. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but it does talk about our MLSs. There's a paragraph in there that talks about how the contract overrides the seller's disclosure statement. The seller's disclosure statement overrides anything in the MLS. So at the MLS, if you've put something in there that, let's say you've mistakenly put in there that the refrigerator does stay, the kitchen refrigerator does stay, but the seller's disclosure statement says it does not stay, then you have to go with what is in the seller's disclosure statement. Okay, so that's kind of the reason why it's important to have the MLS signed, is because you're wanting to get the approval of both clients, the sellers and the buyers, that yes, the information here to our best knowledge is accurate. That's why it's important to have that. Obviously, you need to have an estimated net. Your estimated net is going to be required by the purchase contract. Now, you don't necessarily have to have it when you sign the listing agreement. There isn't anything that says you have to have it done at the time of listing, but you have to ask yourself, what kind of service are you providing to your sellers if you don't? Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I need you, we're going to list it at 150,000. Oh, don't worry about what you're going to make on it. Okay, so go ahead and get that done. That way, when you already have it signed, you have those numbers with you when you start receiving offers. The Breda, this is optional. If you've noticed the bottom of the Breda, it says optional down there. It's optional for the clients to sign that. In this case, the sellers to sign it, but we would like to have you guys submit it and have it on file, at least put your name, the broker's name, and so forth in there. So we strongly recommend that you have it signed. This just gives you more teeth that you went over Breda with your clients at the time that you sat down to sign the listing. So it's really to protect your own tail, in my opinion. You're going to need to have the seller's disclosure statement if available. What I mean by if available is if it's an estate, maybe the sellers haven't lived there in such a long time or never lived there. an investment property, maybe they're not going to have a seller's disclosure. It's not a requirement, but it's strongly suggested. Lead-based paint. Ray, do you know what year it is? So we have to have lead-based paint? 1978. 1978. If the property is built before 1978 or 1978 or earlier, then you're going to need to have a lead-based paint signed. Don't forget, that is a federal law. That's not local. Everyone across the country has to do that. Tax disclosure. You need to go ahead and have the seller sign the tax disclosure. I've had people ask me, well, is this not really necessary? Well, yeah, it is, because it is, again, mentioned in our purchase contracts. It states in there that both parties have basically reviewed the taxes on the property. Wire fraud, you need to go ahead and have your seller sign the wire fraud. The title companies will need this more than anything else. And then our broker, finally, for listings, our broker would like to have you have the seller sign your CMA. I use a simple spreadsheet off the MLS. I actually will handwrite the price ranges on there and then have them sign and date it. This covers your tail as well as your broker when you sit down with them and say, here's what we think the price is going to be, and you sell it in this price range. They sign off on it. That just means that you've gone over the numbers with them. Yes, Sherry, you want to hand her the microphone?
That spreadsheet, or at least the one I use, has a low, high, average,
Yes.
Median. So do you write yours?
I write my own in.
Even if you agree with what it says, or if you disagree with what it says?
If I agree with it, which is very, very rarely, I'll just leave it like it is, because keep in mind what it's doing is it's taking the highest priced house that you have in your list and the lowest priced house. Those are your in numbers. And then it's going to give you just a general average or a median price. So I figure my numbers up differently. So that's how I go about doing it. And you can, as long as you've got something signed from the sellers that, or the buyers for that matter, that you've gone over it, that's perfect. Are there any questions online? Where's the chat? There we go. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. That's what is needed for listings. And what I'm going to do, like I said, after class is to get everything sent out. I'll get this cheat sheet out to you guys afterwards. So what documents are needed for transactions, for your contracts? Here's the rule of thumb that I always use. And keep in mind, guys, I teach the contracts class down at the association. I also teach the day of our post-license classes for new agents. And the big thing that we cover are contracts. And the thing that I always stress is that if you have any document that has been signed or initialed, it should be turned in. Okay. Anything you have signed should be turned in. It not only protects you, it protects the broker. And we're going to talk about KREC and getting audited here later in class. So what is needed? Well, obviously the purchase contract is needed. Purchase contract is definitely needed to have. Any and all addendums and amendments that you have. Let's talk about addendums, the difference between addendums and amendments. Now I'm kind of getting in the weeds a little bit here, but it is somewhat important. Addendums are added to an offer. It is a change that you're making to the purchase contract that you are writing, that you are submitting as an offer. That's an addendum. You're adding something to your offer. That's the way I teach people to remember. You're adding something. Okay. An amendment is written and signed on a contract that has already been signed. So it's an amendment comes after a purchase contract has been signed. Now, here's the important thing. If Ray and I have signed a contract, let's say we sign a purchase contract, we get everybody's initials and dates, and it's all signed today, March 31st. And then 2 days later, Ray approaches me and says, hey, by the way, my buyers need to change the loan type. We're going to go from conventional to FHA. And he goes ahead and changes it on the purchase contract and dates it April 2nd. and then I have my seller sign, initial that change. What have I just done to the purchase contract? I've changed what? What's important? The effective date. Just change the effective date. So if I have just changed the effective date on the purchase contract, does that not mean that all the timelines that we have, the time to get the inspections done, time to get your financing in, time to get the title works done, all those timelines that are in have now just been changed, or they've been extended an additional 2 days? Yes, they have. Because remember, it talks to the last, there's a paragraph in there that says what it defines what the effective date is. And the effective date is the last dated initial or signature on a purchase contract. So correct. So instead of changing the purchase contract, what Ray and I should do is sign an amendment to the contract, changing the financing. It does not change any of the dates. Yes.
Okay, I had one that only the direction on the street was incorrect. So that gives me all that whole extra week to get my inspections. That
By the contract, yes.
okay, cool.
That again, that is if there's a change in a date, an initial date by both parties, that is the effective date. Greg's got.
Lance is exactly right. And that's what you could use if you wanted to go to court and fight it. However, in the spirit of getting along with everybody,
Correct.
I would not run up to the other agent and say, hey, we changed the closing date, so now we get to start all over again a month into the contract. That's not playing nice in the sandbox. And no matter what happens, you want to play nice in the sandbox to get to closing.
Absolutely. With that being said, though, if you are running a little behind on getting inspections done, on getting your repair request submitted, you might have something to work with on that. Okay. So it's imperative that you use amendments. If you've already signed a contract, use the amendments to make any changes. And finally, any amendatory clauses, FHAVA amendatory clauses, those all have to be signed and turned in as well. Make sure you have your earnest money receipt. Okay. Yes, Sherry.
On the amendatory clause, sometimes the lenders don't send that out until like months in if it's a new build. So that doesn't change the effective date of the contract.
No, it does not change the effective date. No, it does not. The only thing that's going to change the effective date is if you make changes to the actual purchase contract. All other amendments, amendatory clauses, none of that's going to change it. That's a great question. So we need to make sure we have the earnest money receipt. Not only do you need to get it turned into the title company, but we need to have a copy of that. Your estimated net or your buyer's closing costs. These are required. You are required by Kansas real estate laws to have these done. Not only are they required by real estate laws, but it's also in our purchase contract. It states right there that you have gone over, or the buyers and sellers have reviewed their costs involved with selling or buying the house. Okay. You need to have your agency agreements, whether it's a listing agreement, which you should have already turned in when you signed your listing, or your buyer agency agreement. Now, Greg Tracy and I were talking about this yesterday. Technically, you should have your buyer agency agreement turned in as soon as you have it signed, but nobody ever does that. We always turn it in when we have our purchase contract signed. And that's okay, because we can't think of anyone that's ever been audited on a buyer agency agreement. So in other words, don't worry about it. Just turn it in when you turn your purchase contract in. Need to have your signed MLS. What we would like for you to do on our end, if it's your listing, have your seller sign it, obviously, when you list it, but you do not and you cannot require the other agent, regardless of which company they're with. It's not a requirement. They do not have to sign it. Okay. You can politely ask, like Greg said, play nice in the sandbox. And a lot of times when agents ask me, well, why do I need to have my buyers sign this, sign off on this MLS? I mentioned to them what I mentioned to you guys earlier. It's in the contract. Let's just cover, it just helps cover our tails, make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay. If you're a buyer, if you're, and I'm trying not to say that, you don't know how bad I want to say that. If you're on the buying side, go ahead and have your buyers sign off on it. Again, it calls it out in the purchase contract. Sellers don't have to sign it, but you can definitely ask. Need to have a seller's disclosure statement if available, and include any additional documents. So let's say Sherry just listed a home in College Hill, and the sellers have gone in and done a ton of work on the basement foundation. The basement walls are coming in. They had a company come out and put the beams in, whatever the case may be. Go ahead and have that documentation and include it with the seller's disclosure statement. When you include it, go ahead, take copies of it. Don't have them do the original, but take copies of it and have them initial and date each page. That way we're forcing the buyers to initial and date every page as well, that they're familiar with what work has been done in the basement. Lead-based paint, got to have that if built prior to 1978. Tax disclosure, again, that is in our purchase contract. You have to have both parties sign off on that. Wire fraud, again, the title companies will need this. Our wire frauds are not set up where both parties sign the same document, each individual party. The buyers will have their own wire fraud that they'll sign. The sellers will have their own individual wire fraud that they'll sign. Inspection repair requests. Guys, this can get a little dicey. What I would recommend is if once you submit a repair request, if you market the request form that you've included the inspection report, make sure you send it over to the other agent. Okay, make sure you get that report over to them. Tracy, do we need the inspection report in our files?
No, but it's great to have on file, and it does cover you.
So it's not required, but it's a great idea to go ahead and include it. That way it's in there if push comes to shove and we need to refer to it. What I am going to suggest to you is if Sherry and I are going back and forth a lot on negotiating repairs, and our repair request has now got a whole bunch of strike throughs and so forth, it may not be a bad idea just to go ahead and write up a new one. Just be careful, because I don't want to get into the weeds in this, but you can, like Greg said, if somebody's not playing nice in the sandbox, they can say, well, this is a whole new repair amendment. We're not signing it. Okay. So if both parties agree just to clean it up, go ahead and get it cleaned up. And make sure you include any invoices. So if you have, if Sherry and I reach an agreement and my sellers have got to get a licensed roofer out there to fix the flashing around the chimney, okay, then I need to make sure I get that invoice from that roofer and make sure we get it turned in. Okay, make sure it's included. Okay. And then last but not least, and quite often I've been informed that this has been missed and is waited, people are waiting to the last minute. Any referrals that you guys have, whether it be Cardis, another agent, whatever the case may be, you've got to get that turned in. Tracy and Devin need to know how that the commission gets paid out. Don't wait to the last minute to turn that in, because now they got to go back in and change everything. And that is a real pain. Okay. Is there any questions? Any questions on what needs to be included? The problem is Greg is the only broker that plays nice in the sandbox. Watch your back. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Joel. Couldn't agree more. Sometimes I'm like, come on, Greg.
Okay, I'm repeating for Greg. You attract more flies with honey.
Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead and before I have Tracy come up. Oh, sorry. I had an agent not want the report because she didn't want herself or seller to see it, because they didn't want to have to fix anything on the report that was asked for or should be reported. Interesting.
Let's talk about that as a separate class.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at another time, because we could really get into the weeds on that one. Yeah. So before we get into how to turn your paperwork in, I want to talk about the importance of when you should get your documents turned in. I want to ask the very simple question. And I know for those of you who've got your cameras on, is there a required time that our documents get submitted to our broker? Shake your head, yeah. Shake your head, yes or no.
Anyone?
Suzanne says yes. Tulio says yes. Ray, what do you think? Yes. Sherry? Yes. Okay. Absolutely. Did you know by Kansas Real Estate Commission, by the laws, that, and it's also in the Code of Ethics, that all your documentation, anything signed, sealed, and delivered, must be turned in to your broker within 10 business days. Okay, I'm going to actually read the language that Mr. Fox provided us. No salesperson or associate broker shall fail to submit to the supervising broker or branch broker within 10 business days any document that must be maintained in the supervising broker's or branch broker's business records for each real estate transaction. The 10-day period shall commence when the document is executed by the client or customer, or if a signature is not required or is not obtained upon presentation of a document to the client or customer. So what it's saying is you've got to get your transaction documents, particularly the purchase contract, submitted within 10 business days after it's been signed. If you don't, if you're one of those that are waiting to the last minute, you're turning all your paperwork on the day of closing or a couple of days before closing. If your file gets audited by KREC, if they end up picking out of all the thousands of files that we have, if they end up picking out yours and they will check our logs within our office to see when it was turned in, you could be subject to a fine. Not only would you be subject to a fine, but I think Greg could be, the brokerage could be subject to a fine. Now, I know that in the past, we've been kind of lackadaisical about it, but I think the feeling is, especially over the last couple of weeks, that this has been happening quite a bit. Don't be surprised if you start getting emails and phone calls from Tracy, Devin, Greg, that you've got to get your paperwork turned in. The problem with that is we don't know there's a purchase contract out there at all until we actually see or hear about it. Okay. So the important thing to remember, guys, is that yes, you can be fined. It is required by law to get your paperwork turned in within 10 business days. I cannot stress that more. If you are waiting to the day of closing, obviously, number one, you could get fined. Number two, and it's probably second most important, and I hear Tracy talk about this sometimes when I come up front to refresh my coffee, that somebody has turned in their paperwork the day of closing and they're missing documents or they're missing signatures. Okay. And if you're like me, you like to get paid the day of closing. Well, it's not going to happen now because you're not going to get paid until you have everything completed. So had you turned all your paperwork in within the 10 business days and something is missing, you are going to find out about it right away. And that way you can get it addressed while you are still working the contract, while you're still working the transaction. You know how difficult it is to go and get a signature. So if it's my sellers and I got to work with Joe Blow from ABC Realty, okay, with his buyers, and we missed a buyer signature somewhere, you know how difficult it is to get them to sign that after closing? It's not easy, guys. Did you want to add something?
Well, not to mention a little professionally embarrassing.
It is professionally embarrassing on both sides, for both the listing and the buying side. Okay, so the importance of getting things turned in, especially within 10 business days, is crucial. Now, when it comes to the mechanical inspection or the repair request, a mandatory clause like we talked about, any amendments that come along through the course of the transaction, as soon as you have that signed, get it turned in. There isn't like a deadline on it. I guess they could apply a deadline to it. You would have 10 business days to do it, But the thing is, you want to get it turned in right away in case something is missed. Now, I like to, I don't want to say pat myself on the back, but I like to think that most of my paperwork documentation is pretty spot on. But even as, how do I say it? Fine tooth comb that I use to go through my documents, I miss stuff all the time.
Even the best agents who have the most impeccable paperwork from time to time will miss something. The sooner we find it, the sooner you can get it corrected and we can move forward.
So it is important, as soon as you guys get your paperwork signed, get it turned in. Okay. If you are, like I said before, if you are expecting to get paid the day of closing and you're turning your paperwork in a day or two before or the day of closing, and you expect to get a check that afternoon, chances are you're going to be waiting a while. Okay. And I'm not going to speak for Tracy or Devin, but I will say that it's very frustrating when they have realtors in our office who are turning their paperwork in and they have closings. Let's say they may have 6 or 7 closings come in one day. Yours is probably going to be at the bottom because they want to get those that have got all their paperwork in. They want to get them done and get those checks cut. Okay. So that leads me to the third thing is by getting your stuff turned in, it gives our staff plenty of time to check things out. Keep in mind, guys, Tracy and Devin are here to protect us. Greg has brought them in to protect us, to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong. If you give staff plenty of time, it could help you save some time and stress. Because it would drive me crazy. I don't know about Sherry and Ray, but I don't know about you guys. But for me, if I was turning all my paperwork in the day of closing, I'd be freaking out over that. What did I miss? What did I miss? What did I miss? Okay, so it's going to save you some time and stress. It also makes sure that your file is compliant. Sherry, Ray, you probably haven't been. Sherry, you've been here when we've had auditors come from KREC. And it's like, it is not normal around this office when the auditor is here. We're all kind of huddled in our offices and going, please not my file, please not my file, please not my file. Okay. And then you walk by and you see him in there and you see that file with your address on it. And it's like, oh crap, or explicitives. So, and then finally, it just ensures you guys get paid, whether you direct deposit or get a check. It just makes sure you guys are going to get paid because all your paperwork's turned in. So what we want to do is to stress the importance of getting it turned in on time. You got 10 business days to get it in. The soonest you can get it in, the better. And so we're going to cover how to do that. Okay, I'm going to lead the first part of this, and then I'm going to ask Tracy to kind of guide us through how to do it in betterks.org. Any questions on that, on the importance of getting it turned in? Perfect. All right. So again, I'm going to stress to you, and I provided at the top of the cheat sheet, that your listing paperwork and your transaction paperwork must be separate. So when I have a listing agreement, I sign a listing, and as crazy as our market is, I may have a purchase contract the day of me signing the listing, the day of me sticking the sign in the yard, I may have a purchase contract. Do not send it all in at once. Don't send your listing in and your contract in all at the same time. Send your listing paperwork in first.
Basically, when we're saying not sending it in all at once, keep your documents separate, keep your listing documents sent in, and then all your transaction documents, your purchase contract in another pile. But sending me your listing agreement with your contract is not helpful.
And the thing for this, the reason for this, guys, is because the way our broker engine, betterks.org, is set up is that we have to have an opportunity to build the file for the listing first. Then when the contract comes in on the listing, your listing is then switched from a listing to a transaction. If you try to upload it all at the same time, what'll end up happening is you could end up with 2 files in there at the same address. one for listing, one for transaction. So that is the main reason, is we want to start the file with the listing first and then switch it to a transaction. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Sorry, I'm getting out of the screen when I walk. I like the pace. So how do we go about getting our paperwork turned in? Very simply put, you can scan it in with the copy machine.
And that's where I jump in a little bit.
Yes.
If you go to favorites on the printers, both printers are the same, east or west. You go to favorites, you'll find pipeline,
Mhm.
copy Devin and I on it. It's all in the same favorites. Scan it in, walk away. Now, granted, in the subject line, especially if you're just scanning in a Bretta, there is no address on the Bretta. We have no idea where it goes. In the subject line, it will be helpful if you put the address in, which tags all the documents to what address. So,
Yeah, so she's spot on. A lot of times what I was doing beforehand was I would just scan everything in. Not only did I scan it into paperless pipeline and then it's saved in there as a favorite, I didn't send it to you directly, but now I'm going to. I would also scan it to myself, especially if it's, you know, not if it's inked. In other words, if you've got in-person signatures, you need it for your own files. The other thing that Tracy and Devin are going to ask you to do is to submit them all at once. Tracy does not like it how I do my files, because I like keeping all my documents separate. My purchase contract is labeled one way. My amendments are labeled a different way. My repair requests are a different way. And so forth. I keep them all separate, and I will scan them in individually. That drives them nuts.
and granted, it takes you more time, but and what we're talking about is only if you're scanning them on the printer.
Correct.
This doesn't go for anything else other than that. But if you just throw all of your listing documents into one pile and scan them in, that's a beautiful thing. We can separate them. Life is good, and it saves you time.
Yep. And the same thing with the transactions. So just take all your paperwork once you have a contract signed, all of it, just shove it in there, send it to the paperless pipeline to Tracy and or Devin or both. Send it to yourself if need be, and then hit scan, hit the button, and it does the work. This is the easiest and fastest way to do it. It's not rocket science, guys. It's not. If you have a scanner at home and you want to do it from your home office or whatnot, we will get you the email address that it'll be sent to.
Yeah, normally, if you're logging into Better KS, you're using Microsoft 365. If you put in the email, paperless pipeline, it comes up just like if you were going to email Greg or myself.
Correct.
It automatically starts populating that address.
Yep.
And again, if you're going to email it, copy Devin and I on it in case one of us is hit by a bus. One of us is going to get the paperwork.
Yep. Heaven forbid that happens.
Well, yeah.
So that is the easiest, fastest, best way to get it turned in. The second way is what we just talked about, is emailing the documents to Tracy and Devin.
And once again, please separate your documents from listing and transaction, which means you may have to send us 2 emails.
Mhm.
But sending in one email, here's a listing document, here's the purchase contract, here's this and that. We have to download all that, separate it, then re-upload it. It just takes more time.
So those are the 2 quickest and easiest ways to do it. Now, if you're working with an assistant or if you like to use betterks.org, the broker engine, there is a way that you can get everything submitted that way too. I personally like to try to do that to help Tracy and Devin save time. But sometimes it's just, I go and just get it turned in. But if I have time to submit it myself, I will. So I want to share the screen here. So how do I go about, it's been so long since I've done a Zoom. Chat, pause recording. Greg, how do I share a screen? Oh, there we're at this save screen. And we want this one. There we go. There we go. And I'm going to shrink down so we won't be able to see chat here. We'll look at chat here in a little bit. Um, I'll set it down there so it's next to it. Okay, so this is your dashboard. betterks.org. If you were in class last week, you know how to get here, you know how to sign in, all that fun stuff. So what you'll want to do is when you have your listings, you're going to go up here to listings, click on it. Or is it, wait. Should I have,
Scroll down to manage documents on the right.
oh, that's right. So if you, on the dashboard, you scroll down, sorry about that, Tracy. Here's your documents list.
And you scroll a little further. It says
Oops.
Manage document list.
Manage document list, you click here. Do you want to drive this?
Oh, I can just point here.
Okay.
Point the way. All right. Once you are into your document list, on the right-hand side, if you want to scroll down a little bit, there we go. You'll see your listings, your transactions, and you'll see under
Here.
reference name there.
Right
There's
here.
your name, there's your address. And if you want to go in to that file, you'll hit action button on the right and it takes you into your file. Now, once there, you have all of your information at the top, on the right of what's going on. And here are all the files that on this particular one have been uploaded and are complete.
Yay, Sherry.
Now, here's one. Well, scroll back up where it says in progress. Remember when it says in progress, there is no document there. Now, if you want to upload a document, this is what we've been talking about. Another way to get your documents in. If you hover over the icons on the right where it says upload document, it'll tell you what those will do. And if you go ahead and click that, this gives you an opportunity, if the document is saved on your computer, to get it uploaded. And this is like super, super easy. And if you click there at the top, big dotted around box there, you can click that and go to wherever your document is saved on your computer, double click it, and then we can go ahead and cancel out of this one because we're not going to upload anything.
Well, I was going to show them something also. The drag and drop feature. I won't
Sure.
actually do it. If you want to, if you open up the file that you have wherever your documents are saved, open that file up. If you left click the document and drag and hold the left button down and drag it over into the box, you can do it that way also.
Yep. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if we go ahead and cancel this box, if you'll scroll down just a minute.
Mhm.
Granted, there is normally, if there's a whole bunch of documents that are left that you need to upload, like your contract or a wire fraud, whatever it is, anything that is left to be uploaded that has not been will show down here where it says Kansas EE in that little red check box,
Right.
because that's the one
here.
that we're actually on. But it will also have other boxes there that you could check mark. Don't.
I'm not.
I know. I'm just saying,
Okay.
when you're doing it, don't. If you have all these different options and all these different
Right.
documents that you want to upload, either do them individually, because otherwise, and this may be too much, every document you click on in that little red check box, if there's multiple ones down there, and there will be, you've just uploaded every document into every file.
Okay. So does that make sense? So in other words, when you are uploading multiple files, let's say there's 6 files, each of them are a different label. Okay. Then all 6 are going into each individual label.
Right. You'll have your contract, your wire fraud, your Bretta under contract. You'll have the same 3 documents under wire fraud, and it does it that way. Now, here's one thing you can do. If you have a whole bunch of documents and you are uploading them, you can put all of those documents under one label. Devin and I can go in and split them.
And what we discussed is so we're going to come back to that. And because keep in mind, this is where we're going to start our listings. When you are ready to start a transaction, let's say it's a buyer side, what you're going to want to do is
under the turquoise listing detail below, on the left.
On the left.
If you're,
oh, there we go. There we go.
If you're going to add a transaction to your listing, that's where you will click. You'll go to the right-hand turquoise box with the little arrow that points down. Nope. Close. That little tiny arrow to the far right. There you go. Add transaction.
There we go.
Now, you'll only do this obviously if it's your listing. Now, if it's your listing in-house, say Sherry and Ray. This is Sherry's listing and Ray sold it. Sherry is going to be the one and the only one that can do it correctly to add the transaction so Ray can start uploading his documents.
And the reason for that is if Ray just immediately starts uploading his transaction documents before Sherry has had the opportunity to do it, now we're going to have two files of the same address. So if it's in-house, let the listing agent get their stuff uploaded first.
Yes, Greg?
And we can fix it, but we don't want to have.
Yes,
Yep.
we can fix everything in here, but we're just trying to help you, help us.
Mhm.
Help you, help us, help you.
And Tracy and Devin have both have said that they are more than willing to work with you individually if you wanted to upload these. Come see them. They'll help you with it. So this is where we would go to do your listings. The last thing we want to cover is,
Oh, no.
oh,
no,
sorry.
No.
I thought we were done. Sorry.
This was just how we created the transaction off an in-house listing. Now,
Got you.
now to create a listing, there's two options here. If you put it in your listing in the MLS
So I'm gonna go to the
active,
back of the dashboard. Start from the dashboard.
right? And within 2 hours, the MLS will push
right.
it into here and it will all automatically be in here. So don't come in and create a listing because again, you'll have two. Now, if you are adding your listing as pending immediately into the MLS, you need to contact Devin and I so that we can pull it in because it will not automatically come in on its own.
So in other words, if you have a listing, as soon as you hit active in the MLS will feed the information, the contract information to Broker Engine. And the file will be already created. You just got to go in there and tighten it up.
But it does take a couple hours at most.
Okay, Sherry.
So if I put it in there and it's active, but I need to send it pending, don't do it like right after I send it active. Give a couple hours before I send it pending.
Well, if it's already pending and you can put it in already pending, you contact Devin and I will pull it.
Okay.
We have to manually pull it in. And it's that simple.
Greg, you want to add something?
Yes, please open a transaction.
Like this one?
Yeah. Okay. You know, when you're in transaction, if you look across the top of the screen or kind of the middle of the screen, right above where it says document list, it says home, transactions, transaction detail, transaction documents.
Mhm.
Those are called breadcrumbs, just for you to know. If you click on transaction details, you would go back into the transaction, but I didn't want you to do that. I
Oh.
want to go back to documents,
On the far right.
transaction documents.
I can't see it.
There you go. Click.
There we go.
And then I want you to notice that right below the document list, it said, no, up at the top where it says document list, there's a line that says transaction documents for School Street and all that. And on the right-hand side of that is a little box. That box, I'm sorry, go down one next to documents. I was in the wrong place. There are two boxes. One is upload documents through email.
That one.
The other one, copy email address. Let's say you've got a buyer or seller that just sent you all the signed documents and you want to submit them in one click. You've got an email with all the documents on it. You copy that email address.
Click that button.
Your email address is copied. Go into your email, paste it in the who you're
Forward.
sending it to with all the documents, and they will come right in here, all of them together, just like we want them. That email address is an individual email address just for this transaction. So that's where you would find if you wanted to forward an email with all the docs.
So as you guys can see, there are several different ways to use Broker Engine to get these uploaded. And if you are like myself, I'm I did things a little bit differently, but now I've got to change. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be getting with Tracy and sit down with her and say, okay, what's the best way for me to do this? And then I'm going to write those notes down, and then I'm just going to go with it.
And that's the beautiful thing about this. There are so many different ways to get your documents to us. We want you to do what works for you, what's easiest for you, what you understand. So, if you want to learn more, great. Devin and I are here to help you. If you're comfortable with just scanning them into the printer, rock on. As long as we get them in the system, I'm a happy camper. But do what's easiest and what you understand.
I know this is Lance didn't say, go to Greg to learn how to do it. Thanks a lot, Lance.
Greg's upset because Lance didn't ask Greg's help.
I'm not touching that one. There are a number of different reasons. I think you got bigger fish to fry, but that's. Sherry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm seeing in my listings, I see this thing that says draft listings. And all three of them are expired and no longer pertinent, and I don't understand.
You good?
Okay, she's in a whole nother section of betterks.org. At this point, I really wouldn't concern yourself with the draft listings.
We'll deal with those.
Yeah, we'll do that on another class.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, sir.
Then you have to let us know so we can fix it.
So what I'm wanting to do is that, let's say that I come in with a purchase contract. I got it signed. I'm my buyers, so I need to start the transaction. I want to start. Let's say I've got a buyer's. I'm the buyer agent. I've got a purchase contract signed, sealed, and delivered. I've got it scanned in. Where would I go to load that up? So here I'm at the dashboard.
Okay, so if it's your listing,
No, it's on my listing.
okay, then you go to transactions, and you go to just click on transactions. Yeah, you may have to go to pending. There we go. Click on pending. And then on the right in turquoise, you'll see with the plus sign, new transaction. And you'll click that button. Everything that is in red is required. You'll need to fill in. Every piece of information will be collected off the contract.
So you fill all the red boxes in.
And then you'd scroll all the way to the bottom and you click save.
Save.
And then it takes you to where you can start uploading your documents.
Perfect. So it's pretty simple and easy to do it that way, in my opinion. And again, I think if I remember correctly, there's also an area in here for referrals, right?
There is an
There
area
is,
for referrals.
right there on the right. Just
Start down at the
scroll down right there.
Yep.
And just so you know, by filling this information in, that takes the place of what we used to make you all fill in a cover sheet.
Yeah.
Because we put all the same information in. I don't care if you have a cover sheet if you put this stuff in.
And we were talking about that yesterday.
I care that you have a cover sheet if you don't fill this thing in.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who are still remaining, now you understand and know why the importance of getting your paperwork turned in early, because all this process has to happen. If I'm strolling into the office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a closing and check in hand, and I hand it all to Tracy and say, I just had it closed. Is there any possibility I can get my check this afternoon?
I will glare at you.
With me, she will throw me out the front door. She'll kick me out. So you guys can see that there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. That's one of the reasons and the main reason why we need to get our stuff turned in.
And let me take that one step further. If Sherry comes in and she's not giving us a single document, and we start working on her to try to get her paid and all that, and then Lance walks in and says, all my documents are here, I want to be paid now. We're going to look at Lance and say, you ought to talk to Sherry because she screwed you up by not turning in all her paperwork for her. So take care of each other.
Sherry.
Help us take care of you.
I was going to go to a steak dinner that night too. All right. Anybody have any questions? Let me pull the chat.
Recap, please, how you got to this new you have to start the new transaction to get to this form.
Yep. Go to transactions pending,
And then on the far right is turquoise.
new
Okay.
transaction.
Transactions.
Yeah, if you hover over transactions, the drop down box should pop up.
I'm here. There you go. Okay, so that's only if I'm opening it myself, which I have.
All right, where's the chat box? There we go. All right, don't see any questions in chat. I am going to stop screen sharing. Oh, stop sharing. There we go.
There you go.
Thank you. All right. I want to thank everyone for coming to class. If you have any questions, concerns, you can talk to Tracy, you can talk to Devin, and yes, you can even talk to Greg.
Just talk really slow.
Greg says talk really slow.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.